A disposable employee is sent on a human expedition to colonize the ice world Niflheim. After one iteration dies, a new body is regenerated with most of his memories intact. Mickey 17 is directed by Bong Joon-ho and stars Robert Pattinson, Naomi Ackie, Mark Ruffalo, Toni Collette, and many more. So, Jeffrey, what did you think about Mickey 17?
Well, it's a new Bong Joon-ho movie, so I dressed up. Not really. I had a meeting at work today, and also my mom just told me that she doesn't know why I always look the way that I do in Movie Husbands, so here I am.
People are going to think you've gone crazy without your metal t-shirts.
Yeah, no, I had a meeting at work, and we're filming right now, and I didn't feel like changing, so here you go. Anyway, I don't know whether to judge Mickey 17 as a Bong Joon-ho movie or a $100 million Warner Brothers movie, because ostensibly it's both. Obviously, this is part of Bong Joon-ho's filmography, and it is like a big swing for Warner Brothers being like a fairly high-budget blank check movie. Bong Joon-ho, for my money, has 3 masterpieces in his filmography, and he's known for just having this very exacting expert management of tone. His films just tend to be able to vary wildly between comedy, between horror, between political satire. There are like so many films wrapped into one, and the amount that they vary in tone and how he's able to jump from tone to tone is extremely skillful. There's not many people that are able to do something like that. And at the same time, his films are very intricately written and intricately plotted. So they tend to have all of these details, especially in the frame. Like he puts a lot of details in his framing that you only notice on a second or third viewing. This is particularly noticeable in his real breakout film, Parasite, from 2019. Frankly, I've seen his entire filmography, and it's present in all of his films. Like, he's a very, very good filmmaker. Mickey 17 certainly has all of the ingredients of a Bong Joon-ho film, but for me, I have to say it felt more like a pale outline of what he does best rather than what he typically does best. The ideas seem more confused. The politics seem more obvious. And the fatal flaw for me is that it just has this complete lack of narrative momentum, unfortunately. It's not a boring movie. And honestly, it's so stuffed with great ideas that I'm really surprised that I didn't like it more. And I feel kind of poorly taking issue with it because we want original ideas in our filmmaking, but we also want them to be really well executed. I thought that this is kind of an introduction to Bong Joon-ho, much more than it is a capper on his filmography that I was looking for. I just don't think that it's a very successful film, even as very many individual parts of it are extremely creative and interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I like what you had to say about whether to judge it as a Warner Brothers big budget movie or a Bong Joon-ho movie. For the most part, I think that this film was like an experimental mainstream combination of Snowpiercer and Okja in many regards. As you said, I really agree with a lot of its themes, a lot of its messaging as a whole, but I'm a little lukewarm on the delivery or the overall impact that the film has. I think one of the film's best features, and this is something you were alluding to a little bit, are in its little commentaries about political life or social life. There's this overarching commentary on power, wealth, and oppression in the film, but within that we get all these little reflections as well, like how this big wealth gap between classes can lead to poor people taking on more risky jobs so that they can make a living, or how excessive human consumption can lead to the destruction of a native species. There are so many reflections packed in this film, and I assume we'll go into a little bit more of those as we progress in this review. There are things that I really appreciate about that, and that's one of them. But overall, this just seems a little bit like he's recycling some of the themes of his previous movies to a lesser effect, because something like Okja dealt with our food industry and how we massively, produce animals and then slaughter them. So I think that film has such a great commentary around that particular subject. But since this film kind of branches that subject along with so many other subjects like Snowpiercer and its class division, that movie is so specific about dealing with that subject. This movie, I felt like there were no new perspectives to learn, nothing to gain.
Balancing all of these things together is something he actually often does well. But in this film, they feel so much more separate from one another than they feel fused together. So like a good example of this is the housekeeper in Parasite, which takes the movie into a completely different direction. That's just a little detail. We think the housekeeper's gone, and then the movie ends up propelling us in an insane direction that we didn't see coming. Here, we have a variety of subplots that could do that don't. There is the debt that Mickey and his friend have. There's the cloning ethical issue. There's this Trump-like oligarch that I'm sure we'll talk about and his really awful wife. A romantic love triangle between multiples, and even like you mentioned the species and the planet that they land on. So that is a whole other thematic bit that, is a reminiscent of Okja. The film is like a combination of all of those films, as you were saying, but it just feels so much more forced and predetermined than those films were,
Yeah.
where many of the films like Parasite feel spontaneous. Obviously it's planned, and then you could look back on the film and see the ways that it's planned, but it doesn't have that feeling of spontaneity and the feeling of aha when things start to come together. Always the example I like to use for this is Pulp Fiction. The first time you watch Pulp Fiction, many people, including myself, will forget about the diner sequence in the beginning, and then when they're in the diner at the end and the holdup is about to begin, they go, oh, and it all falls into place.
Yeah.
Bong is so good at that, and I don't think that's there in this movie, and it doesn't necessarily need to be there, but it is a thing that very easily ties stories together in a way that he didn't really do as much here.
Yeah, for me, this is a classic case of the plot driving the characters rather than the characters driving the plot.
Yeah.
And I say that in many reviews of ours, in which I feel like it's just the characters don't feel like they're driving themselves forward. They feel like they're being driven forward to meet these expectations that the film has already predestined them to be.
Very good way to say it, actually, because the film does feel kind of inorganic in a way.
Yeah.
And it does feel like it's just kind of trudging along without much momentum or excitement or anything, and that's probably the origin of that.
Yeah, but let's get into these characters as well as the premise of the film. So we have Robert Pattinson. He plays Mickey Barnes in the film. He is this guy that's down on his luck. He has no buddy. Earth is sort of falling to pieces, it seems.
Yeah, doesn't seem good there.
Yeah, it does not seem good. So he decides to take this job without reading the fine print of being an expendable. So he goes into space and he can be cloned. He's used for scientific purposes. So for example, when they land at this new planet, they have him go outside to test for any pathogens. And when he comes back in sick, he ends up killing himself multiple times going out here so they could test the vaccine.
It's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah, it's a really good part of the movie.
He's like repeatedly spitting blood, and yeah, the editing is really funny in that.
But it really sets up this understanding of what his purpose is in this role. With so many iterations that his character has to go through in terms of the lives he's living, there's a lot of different nuances to these difference in character personality traits, even though they're the same person. This becomes a little bit more apparent as the film progresses because we sort of hone in on these two iterations of Mickey. These two particular characters, we get to see these nuances between their personalities, and I think he just did a wonderful job handling those nuances. So he comes across Naomi Akkie's character, who plays Nasha in the film, and she becomes his love interest. They find each other, and she brings a lot of heart to the film, I think. I would say she really shines towards the back half of the film, particularly towards the end, which I don't want to get into too many details about.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's in some ways in opposition to Mark Ruffalo's character and his wife, who are funny occasionally in the brunt of jokes, but I think are caricatures, and that's okay. I mean, that's fine. But like, satire always has this issue, I think, that it's really hard to make fun of something and have a person be representative of an idea while also making that a fully fledged character. They definitely aren't fully fledged characters, in my opinion, but if it was going to go in a satirical direction, which I think it is, I wish that the humor was a little bit sharper. They seemed like very blah characters to me, and it didn't seem to justify how hollow they were as people with, you know, an upside of comedy or an upside of sharp satire.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, I want to put a little note in here about one thing that Julia Louis-Dreyfus said about the end of Veep, of how it wasn't funny anymore because it was all just true.
Yeah.
And this Mark Ruffalo character is very much people that exist now in politics and government. It's very much on the nose, and it seems satirical, but it's also oddly just too true.
Yeah, I remember The Daily Show, like way back in the day, back when our politics were still like a little bit normal. He used to say that he felt like he was spitting spitballs from the back of the classroom. And I think that The Daily Show has taken on a very different type of satire in these days. Is kind of this outrage, how is this still happening type of satire.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be here in this film. And again, I'm not trying to impose something it wasn't thinking on the film. I'm just trying to find ways that this small caricature, this very simplified caricature, could have been more elaborate in some way or could have hit a little deeper.
Yeah, but Mark Ruffalo's character plays Kenneth Marshall, and he's sort of the head of the ship, which is a little bit odd because Toni Collette's character, who plays his wife, is always in his ear telling him all the information that he needs to know.
Yeah.
Much like a politician who has to show up in every given place at any given time and need the actual specifics, but they have no idea what they are because they're just too dumb or just do not care about them.
Yeah.
Or figurehead.
That's another good tail-end with Veep.
Yes, yeah. So this guy, he just really values wealth. He values the illusion of importance, regardless if it has to be contrived or not. For example, towards the end of the film, there's this sequence where this battle is about to happen, and he's so concerned with it being filmed and how he looks in it. And Toni Collette, I think I was scared of her the most in the film
Yeah.
because she is clearly calling the shots. She is more intelligent, and therefore I think she's more dangerous. It's a good comparison to Mark Ruffalo because he is just this dumb character, but she is truly evil in her intentions.
Yeah, she's very callous, and I can't tell if she doesn't know or doesn't care how much harm she's causing. Just this idea that you would cut a tail off of an animal that's in front of you and like just put it in a blender and taste it
The
is
juice.
yeah,
Try my
it was
juice.
just like horrifying.
Or my sauce, she called it.
Yeah, her sauce.
Her sauce.
That's one theme I think that the film doesn't contemplate enough. But in addition to that, there are some things that in it that I really like. But again, they're not like, you're not looking at them in any kind of new way. They just are there to be stated. One of the archetypes I like is just this idea of like you working yourself to death at an organization that doesn't care about you. They're just going to throw you down the chute and burn you and then print you out again. That's a great metaphor for the working class. It's a great metaphor for like, something we've seen all the way back to Animal Farm. I like that idea, and I think that that's really true, and class issues and certainly issues of labor have been on Bong's mind for his entire filmography. And I'm just surprised it's not a little deeper here because he has explored it deeper many, many times. So I like the idea. I like the metaphor on paper. I just don't think it's executed that well. And again, it's fighting for attention with all of these other half-baked ideas that the film has in mind.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like Snowpiercer puts so much reflection in the design of the train itself, how the poor people
Yes.
are towards the back of it,
Yeah.
much like the Titanic and steerage, for example. As you get closer to the front of the train, you get more wealth and you get more power. It's just a great like visual representation of this pyramid of power and wealth. And so this film doesn't really make a point to do any of that. Like it doesn't show the ship in any way of importance. It doesn't show how like Mickey gets this invitation. He wins to have dinner with them in their place. And we don't know where in the ship this is. There's no way that shows how really separate and divided they are from the rest of the people on the ship. And I think that would be an important thing to show because it would just heighten this difference, this class difference.
One of the reasons that I'm really glad you brought up the Snowpiercer example, because one of the reasons that's brilliant is it has a function for both plot and theme, which is really hard to do. And again, Bong does that so effortlessly throughout his filmography.
Everything. Parasite.
Yeah, he's able to fuse those things together so well, and that is a perfect metaphor for this. I will say on some positives, the film looks really, really good. There's been a lot of righteous kind of like hand-wringing on my side about the way Marvel movies look and how visual effects just don't look good anymore. This is a great counterexample to that. I think the creature effects in particular, they look fantastic. I never once thought that they didn't look real, and they're in a variety of sequences in a variety of places. So like even on the ship, in a snowstorm, in a cave, I think everything looks really, really great. There's no obvious time that I saw the seams of the production. There's no obvious time I could say, well, that's clearly not a set and that's special effects. I thought they did a really good job of the harmonious look of the film.
I completely agree. The creepers are absolutely adorable, and if they existed in real life, I would like to be friends with them. All right, so you ready to go to grades?
Yeah, I'm going to give this film a C+, which I feel really bad about. I'm a big Bong Joon-ho fan. I think there's so many original ideas here, and I just wish they were executed a bit better. It was starting to hit for me about 90 minutes in. Like, I don't think this is too much of a spoiler to say, but once everyone kind of figures out what's going on, there's like a banding together moment where the proletariat starts to say, we have to band together and overcome and blah, blah, blah. And I started feeling something at that moment. And then the way it ended, I don't know, I almost would have preferred that it ended a different way. It felt like such like a lapsed ending. Like there wasn't anything punchy or interesting or exciting about it. And I felt like it really squandered some of the excitement that I was getting during those moments. But anyway, I don't think Bong Joon-ho is running out of ideas anytime soon. In fact, I think this movie shows that maybe he has too many ideas. I think he's still a great filmmaker. This one was just a bit of a misfire and a miscalculation.
Completely agree. I give the film a C+ as well. I really do love his work, and I do appreciate a lot of things that's happening in this film. One thing you had just talked about, which I agree with, is the ending seeming a little lax. You know what it is? This is a very traditional story about oppressors versus the oppressed and just the battle. And we've seen this play out in so many different films, and it always has the same resolution, which is understandable. Obviously, the oppressed are going to fight and win their way to taking over and making a better world. That is just so obvious to me, so it was so predictable. And I guess that has to be the resolution here, but I just don't understand further than that I don't know.
It has-
I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's
well,
just generic, but it's also there was nothing punchy about it.
It has to be that way, but if you're emotionally involved in the story, then you tend to not care that it's an archetype.
Very true. Thank you for putting that better than I tried to.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of better, like V for Vendetta or something.
Yeah.
Right? Where you're like, you're psyched that they're rising up. And that's definitely not present in this film.
All right, and that's it for a review of Mickey 17. Mickey 17 is now in theater, so if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Let us know in the comments, what did you think about this film? As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.